Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video. You join me again at Superbike Factory at Donington, one of the biggest used bike shops in the UK, and I'm here today to look at these cheeky little adventure bikes. First up, the CB500X from Honda, a very popular motorcycle and for good reason, and also the Suzuki V-Strom 650, also a popular bike and also for good reason. But which one should you buy? Well, I've had plenty of time riding them both today, and so in this video we'll go through all of the details and I'll give you my pick at the end. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Superbike Factory for sponsoring the channel and making this video possible. As you can see, they've got loads of bikes in stock, so I definitely recommend getting down here to check them out. Or you can take a look at their website. I've linked to it down in the description, and they deliver plenty of their bikes, some of them for free. Now, as usual, I'll go through all the major review categories, give them both a score, and hopefully that'll pragmatically lead us to our winner. So we'll start with the engine, and in the V-Strom we've got their 650 V-twin that you'll also find in the SV650 Naked. It's been around for quite some time now, but it's still a really nice little engine, plenty of character, decent power and torque, and to be honest, I've got absolutely no complaints about the engine on this bike. The Honda though, well, naturally, with it being a smaller capacity engine, you've got a little bit less power and torque, and so it doesn't feel quite as lively or substantial or satisfying. The other thing is you have to work it harder to get more out of it, and I found that it was a little more vibey because of that. And so on an adventure touring bike like this, where you might want to be doing some motorway miles and that sort of thing, that's not so desirable. I also found it a little more choppy on and off the throttle. I think it's something that they've worked on for the new bike. It's got revised fuel injection settings, but this is a 2020 model, so previous to the current generation, and I did find it significantly more choppy on and off the throttle versus the V-Strom, and so a little bit less pleasant to ride. And I mean, it's still a nice engine. I really enjoyed this bike when I borrowed one recently from Honda, and it does have a nice light clutch. It's got a nice light gearbox. They've both got decent tank capacity and therefore range, but out of these two bikes, for me, easily on the engine, it's the V-Strom. Now, number two, the sound. I'll start them both up for you so that you can hear them in action. And although they're both twins, they sound pretty different. This is a parallel twin with a 180 crank, so it sounds like this. Sounds okay, but I think it's always going to be difficult for a 180 parallel twin to beat a V-twin. Let me know what you think down in the comments, which one sounds better, but for me it's an easy point for the V. Now onto the handling, and the V-Strom is a decent all-rounder. It's a little bit heavier than the CB500, but the suspension feels fine, the braking feels fine, and it's a perfectly pleasant bike to ride. I wouldn't say it's outstanding in any particular area, but it's just a good, solid choice. The Honda, it is a little bit lighter. It feels more nimble and agile. The braking possibly feels a little better than the Suzuki, and that's despite it having a single disc, whereas the new version of this bike has twin discs. But the letdown for me is the suspension. It feels too soft, both front and rear, and it led to a ride that is quite wallowy and bouncy. Again, that's somewhat been sorted out on the new version of this bike. It gets a Showa upside down fork, much higher spec than what we've got on this one here, and with some better suspension, the Honda would almost certainly be my pick just for that extra lightness and quickness. But I think I have to go for the Suzuki again, just because it feels more neutral. It's a better balance between firmness and comfort. Now, a quick word on like off-road riding, because I know that's a big part of the adventure bike image, but I don't think either of these are particularly great choices for off tarmac. Both have a fairly awkward standing position. They've both got rubbery road focus foot pegs, similar ground clearance on the two bikes, and they've both got quite exposed exhaust headers, and then similar cast wheels. So a 19-incher at the front, which gives it a little bit more off-road ability, 17 at the rear, but really they're not set up for it. And so I can't really declare a winner here, because I reckon if you're serious about riding an adventure bike off-road, just save up a little bit and get a T7. Now you certainly want a bike of this nature to be comfortable. I mean, it says it right here, sport, adventure, tourer. There's nothing this bike can't do. You know, it's intended for decent mileage, a little bit of touring, and each one has its strengths. I mean, that soft suspension that I was just talking about on the CB500, it's not great for sporty riding, but it does give you a very cushy ride and you barely notice any imperfections in the tarmac. It is a little narrower overall though, and so I wouldn't say that the wind protection is quite as good as the Suzuki, certainly on your arms and on your shoulders and that sort of thing, whereas the Suzuki's just got a bit more width to the tank and the windscreen, and this one, I think they're accessories. This one's fitted with the handguards, so that's something to look out for if you buy one used. I think I'm gonna have to call this one a draw because it's certainly the more comfy ride, but the wind protection is quite a lot better on this bike, and so it's tough to pick a winner. And I should add that ergonomically, I found them very similar. Perhaps the seat's a little wider on this bike, but the seat height, the peg position, the handlebar position feel very similar indeed. Now, adventure bikes, especially the big ones, can be some of the most techie bikes on the market, but not at this end of the pricing spectrum. These are both quite simple bikes. This generation of CB500X, it has ABS, an LCD dash, LED lighting. That's it. The V-Strom though, it gets 2 levels of traction control and you can switch it off. This particular bike has heated grips on it, although to be fair, you can probably get them for the Honda. You've got a 12-volt power socket here, so if you want to run a sat-nav or something like that, then you've got the option. And then it's not so much tech, it's more like features, but it does have a center stand and then a little rack on the back here, and also a remote preload adjuster, which if you like to add luggage, sometimes remove it, sometimes take a passenger, sometimes not. It is a real convenience to have that, and I really wish my bike, which is parked over there, had one as well. Like I say, both pretty simple bikes. There's not a great deal in it, but clearly this one just offers a few more little touches and features. Now visually, if you can ignore the top box on this bike, I think it's clearly the better looking bike. It's got more of that big shouldered adventure bike look. It's got some nice paintwork and graphics as well. I really like this sort of, what is that? It's not really camo. I think it's meant to look like cracked earth. And then also you've got these little fluorescent highlights just in there. These silver panels look nice. And generally all over the bike, you've got the typical Honda levels of finish, even though it's pretty affordable. The V-Strom, I wouldn't say aesthetics are necessarily its strong point, and I don't think it's helped by this black paint job, which makes it look quite plain. I think it also comes in yellow, and that bike does look a little bit more exciting, but generally it's quite rounded and sort of generic, and also a little bit busy in places. I'm talking here and at the back here, there's a lot going on. I do think I could live with it, and I think if you kitted it out with some adventure-y parts like crash bars and luggage, it might look a little more mean. But side by side, for me, this bike's the easy winner. Price-wise, well, this one's about $5,200, this one's about $5,800, I believe, and they're both 2019 models. They're both similar in terms of mileage, and so I think you'd have to give it to the CB, although if you look through the Superbike factory stock on their website, you know, there are plenty of examples of both bikes at lots of different price points, and that's because the CB500X goes back many years in different forms, and the same can be said for the V-Strom. There's lots of different eras of this bike available here at the shop, and so yeah, there's something for everybody in terms of budget, but between these two that I'm looking at today, it's the Honda that's the most affordable. All right, so it's time to tally up the scores, and the engine, the sound, the handling, the tech, all went to the V-Strom. I called the comfort a draw, and then looks and price both go to the Honda, so it's 4-2. I think that's probably a fair reflection of my experience today, having spent a bit of time with both of them. If I was coming to the shop today with, you know, between 5 and 6 grand to spend on a small adventure bike, I'm 99% sure I'd come away with the V-Strom. It just feels that bit more substantial in terms of performance and the way it sits on the road, and so for me, you feel like you're getting a bit more for your money. That said, if this 5 to 6 grand budget all sounds a bit meager to you and you're looking to spend double that, then fortunately I've already made a comparison of the best sub 10K adventure bikes here at Superbike Factory, and you can watch it now by clicking here. Enjoy.